Hello and welcome back to Leeds Student Television. As we approach 5 months into the new Labour government, many students are continuing to feel neglected by those in power. To find out more, I am delighted to be joined by Herbert, who is National Chair of Labour Students. Ruby, welcome to LSTV.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. To begin, can we go back in time and look at when you first joined the Labour Party? What inspired you firstly to join Labour and then leading you on to wanting to become chair?
Yeah, so I joined the Labour Party after the 2019 election when we suffered our worst defeat since 1935. I think I and a lot of other people then knew that we needed new people in the party to change the direction so we could win a Labour government, beat the Tories and deliver some real change. I was 15. I went to some local Labour Party meetings, didn't find them that interesting and I only particularly got involved when I came to university. And when I got to Leeds, I met other young people who were equally interested in politics. I campaigned for some great candidates across the city in the local elections. And I think through that, I really found inspiration and wanted to become more involved. So I went along to some National Labour student events and then I got inspired to stand for chair because I knew that as we were preparing for general election and to get into government, we needed to really speak up on issues like housing, and the cost of living that are really affecting students, and I wanted to be part of that and lead the student movement there.
So on those issues, what, I guess, are Labour students' goals for the next academic year, for the year ahead?
So I'm really keen to encourage our Labour societies around the country, we have about 50, to build energised student bases and big groups who are willing to deliver a message of equality on their campus and speak up for students on the issues that are really affecting them right now. I think that's something that we're really keen to build on. It's been a big success. And from my side, it's my job to engage with the government and tell them what students are feeling, speak up for students and engage with the government, the party, and other stakeholders.
And obviously you're in a very important position within basically heading up the whole student side of Labour. What responsibility and what role do you think students have and young people in general have in shaping our politics of today?
I think young people have a really important role in politics because we have a unique voice that we bring to the table, and I've really enjoyed getting involved in the student side of politics and representing a group of students and a group of young people who believe in equality. But overall, I think it's crucial that we have young voices in every area that affects us. We're a big player in the debate around housing. It's been young people leading the charge on building more housing, which is now a big part of Labour policy. In health, it's another issue that's top of the country's agenda, and young people are also affected by that. The cost of living is hitting us the hardest. I think it's really important that we have our voices heard in every room, and we have young MPs now, like we have I think 8 MPs under the age of 30, which is really important, and it's really good to see, and young people need to have that confidence to stay involved and make sure their voices are getting heard.
And on the cost of living that you mentioned, the government recently announced a rise to university tuition fees from April 2025, which will see them rise by £285 in order to try and close the funding gap that we're seeing in higher education at the moment. I recently went to the streets of Leeds and found that students are not very welcoming to the news. What is your view on the announcement, and what part is Labour students playing to represent students' interests?
Yeah, this is such an important conversation to be having because you and I know, and all students know, that we've been hit really hard by the cost of living crisis. And over the last 14 years, our experience in higher education has got worse and worse, and we felt a bigger financial burden. So I think it's really important to talk about it. Universities have a funding crisis. That's the fault of the Conservative governments the last 14 years who haven't been supporting them, haven't been paying staff, and they've let vice-chancellors get away with increasing their own salaries at the expense of all the students and staff on campus. I think a couple of things that were in the announcements about higher education that have kind of been brushed over. Firstly, the increase in tuition fees won't mean that students are paying more when they graduate. It won't increase monthly repayments. And it's not actually money that we'll see coming out of our pockets. What we will see is the increase in maintenance in line with inflation, which for some students will give them an extra £414 a year for students who are worse off. And that's going to make a real difference to people who are struggling to pay their rent, for bills, for food. The government have also, I think, added a really important thing to the conversation about holding universities to account for their side of the deal that they're meant to be holding up. We've really been hard done by universities. Our teaching quality is poor. We're not getting face-to-face time, and universities aren't giving us enough support for academically challenging courses. And I think we need to make sure that they're continuing to be held to account for our experiences to improve. One thing I would really like to see, though, which I think it's really important students keep asking for in terms of material support, is the reintroduction of maintenance grants. They help the poorest students in a system which is really complicated. We all know how complicated the student finance system is, but it relies so much on the assumption that your parents can support you. It isn't materially enough for people who just can't afford to put lots of hours into part-time work, and I think grants would really tackle that, and that's something I want to see in future.
And that's something that the National Union of Students is also campaigning for. They also recently found in a recent study that 1/3 of students are struggling with housing costs, and with 84% of those students having experienced issues in their housing, with almost half of those with mould. What role can the government play to help student renters?
Yeah, housing is top of the agenda for so many students. I think it's the biggest issue that we see in our day-to-day lives when we think about what part of politics is actually affecting us. We think that our housing situation is difficult. Students are at the bottom of a housing ladder. Landlords patronise us, assume we don't know our rights. They charge us ridiculously high rents. Supply is low and conditions are poor, as you've just mentioned. So I think it's important that this is something that's taken seriously. I'm really glad that there's been a big commitment to building more housing, because increasing the supply will really help us. But also that there's a renters' rights bill coming through Parliament, which is going to end Section 21 evictions, no-fault evictions that is, and hold landlords accountable by having a register so that local authorities have powers to actually take action on landlords who aren't keeping their properties in good conditions. That will really help students. But I think another thing that's really important, and this is a message to students, is you need to know your rights. And often landlords get away with a lot by assuming that we don't know what we can and can't ask for. They have to keep your deposit in a certain place, and they're not allowed to just make unreasonable deductions, for example. And that's something that I think if landlords are challenged on, they will back down on. So it's really important that students read up on their rights. Student unions can be really helpful with that, and that will help as well.
Make sure to read your rights. Students are also facing a mental health crisis, with more students than ever before being referred to counselling, which is putting severe strain on our services. What would you like to see from the government to increase support for students' mental health? There are things I'd like to see from the government, but I think one thing that we need to address is that universities are playing a big part in this. It's university management giving us worse teaching qualities and big workloads, big stresses without support and mental health provisions that's having a big impact on students. Poor housing conditions affect our mental health, not being able to pay our bills and our rent and our food. The fact that 69% of students are working part-time and 42% of all students in part-time courses are working paycheck to paycheck is having a huge impact on our mental health. These are all issues that need to be fixed as part of tackling a mental health crisis. Overall, I think the problems in mental health care are symptoms of problems that we're seeing with the NHS in general. So waiting lists are at an all-time high in all areas, and that includes mental health services. So bringing down waiting lists will have an impact on improving the care that's available for mental health. The government's committed to 8,500 new mental health staff, which will benefit young people the most. But I think it's really important we hold universities to account in their role in affecting students. Part of that, playing that role in holding universities to account, are the students themselves. You mentioned that when you first came to Leeds, that's when you got really politically active, and especially in student politics and in Labour. If you could give one piece of advice to students considering getting politically active on campus or getting involved in student politics, what would that be?
I think be confident in an issue that you know and care about and use your voice in that area. We all have things that are important to us and that we want to make a difference in. Find your area and don't be afraid to speak up. I think another thing that's important is, yes, it's really great to get involved in student politics. It's something I've done and have really enjoyed, but also students shouldn't be limited to student politics. Be a voice in any room. Think about standing for council or getting involved with a local campaign. Young people's voices are important in every room, not just in ones full of students.
And finally, if you could invite one Labour figure, past or present, to speak at the University of Leeds, who would it be and why?
I think it would be Alice Bacon, who was the first woman MP in Leeds. She's a brilliant woman, and spent her life campaigning for comprehensive education.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruby, for joining us today on LSTV. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much.